Welcome back to Propaganda by the Seed. It's been a while since I managed to get an episode out because it is the busiest time of year for me, what with shipping stuff for the nursery, potting up other stuff for the nursery, propagating new stuff for the nursery, various other time commitments. But I'm going to try and get this one out before June 1st, and I think I'll make it. We've got some rain coming, so it makes it a little bit easier to tear myself away from the garden and do a little editing to bring you an episode with Ken Asmus of Oikos Tree Crops. He's been around. He's done many interesting projects, and today I've got an episode for you about perennial bean breeding. But first, let's hear from our friends at the Channel Zero Podcast Network.
The Frontline Herbalism Podcast is a show for people who love plants and care about liberation. Plant knowledge, medicine-making tips, interviews, and advice on how to skill up to strengthen collective autonomy, self-defense, and resilience to climate change, capitalism, and state violence. Find the podcast at solidarityapothecary.org/podcast.
Ken Asmus, welcome to Propaganda by the
Good.
Seed. How you doing?
How are you doing?
Getting by,
Getting by.
getting into winter mode, which is nice. It's a nice time
Yes.
to do things like I try to record most of my podcasts in this season and then kind of feed them out through the rest of the year. So very excited to be talking to you.
Well, glad to be here. Glad to
And
be here.
even if people aren't familiar with Ken Asmus, a lot of people will recognize the name Oikos Tree Crops.
Right. Yes.
So if you could talk a little bit about what Oikos is and what you've done with it over the past, I guess, probably several decades at this point.
Yeah. So the start of Oikos Tree Crops was really right after I got out of college in 1979, and I just had a small. At that time, I was helping with landscape maintenance jobs and things that I could work on. During the winter, I'd prune apple trees or help other people with different outdoor projects, I guess you could call it. And eventually I started what would be at that time a mail order business, and I structured it around edible food plants. And so I did that as kind of something I was interested in first, and I wasn't really too concerned about the marketability of it. I didn't have any land, and eventually, within a year or two, I had purchased a small acreage, about 13 acres, and I began to farm that, and that's what started the nursery. And I started selling more and more plants from there. And then as the time went on, I also made plantings from the different nursery stock that I was growing and other things when I used to exchange seeds. And that exchange of seeds or the purchase of seeds helped create my repository of different food plants that I have. And that's how the Thicket Bean came into existence. And that one was an exchange through, I think it was Eric Tonsmeyer when he first had his seed company. It was prior to him publishing anything substantial like Edible Forests or the Perennial Vegetable book. And I started growing the plants there for seed production and kind of got curious more and more about it. And that was one crop that I really kind of invested more time and energy in than most other crops. So that's kind of the story of Oikos. And then I retired. Oh, I got to mention I retired. But in 2021, after COVID, then I closed down the farm, and then I concentrated more on my writing and also the collection I had just to see where I could take it and just enjoy it more often rather than work like a dog trying to get orders out. And I still sell seeds today, but it's nothing like it was as far as the robust nature of the nursery business. So
Yeah. Well, I can certainly understand, wanting to take it a little bit easy once in
Oh
a
yeah.
while. Um, do you have any sort of succession plan for Oikos? Because we've seen kind of in the history of these big collections of perennial edible plants
Yeah.
that people build up.
Yeah.
Sometimes they get really lost or disappear, and that's
Yes.
always such a devastating loss.
It is, but only you care about that and a few other people. The general public doesn't. And so if you try to explain that, I don't know, maybe you've had some experience with this, but if you try to explain, oh, this is really valuable, this repository that this person did or had, we should we should really cherish it. And it's almost like, what? No, no, thanks, because it doesn't fit into like a conservation easement thing. It doesn't fit into something valuable to other people. Um, so it's hard explaining it to others. And I noticed this, I think it was 10 or 15 years ago, I started phoning some of my other seed friends and who had repositories or working on things. I'm going, what are you doing? And they were grasping at straws too, trying to figure out what to do. And sometimes it'll end up in a private university that will maintain the collection or use it in some way. And sometimes it could be some other um, institution that has deep pockets that feels it's of value
Yeah,
in some way. And but over time, in those situations, sometimes that fails as well. And it takes maybe 10 or 20 years, and the people who were interested in it are no longer there. And then it just fades out. The property is sold or it's given away or whatever. And so for me, my thing was, well, for now, we'll keep it in my family. So um, maybe there's at some point someone will find it of value and use it or buy it or something. But for now, I am having some university people and nonprofits visit and helping them with different projects. So I am
that's
reaching out
cool.
farther. Yeah, because I never had time for that before when I had my nursery. There was just no time for that.
Yeah,
And so
yeah. Running a
now
retail
there's,
nursery kind of eats up a lot of time.
oh my gosh, it's crazy. So now now it's way more enjoyable and I get to meet younger people that are doing different things. Like a couple weeks ago, I had the folks from Rescue Nature from Detroit out to my farm, and they're working on this project. And I think that's going to work. They have enough resources behind it to continue growing these plants in other locations
Excellent.
and build up these little mini repositories throughout the state of Michigan in different places. And other ones, yeah, sometimes it might work out and sometimes not, but I'm optimistic because these plants more than ever are incredibly valuable for food production, for farmers to make a profit from. And I'm constantly trying to think of ways to get it into the hands of people that could actually make a living growing the plants and using the plants and creating healthy foods. So
That's
that's really,
excellent.
yeah, that's where my focus is now.
Yeah,
So that's the other stuff I was doing, I just dropped.
fair
So
enough. You
yeah.
gotta prioritize sometimes, and I
And
always
that's why the thicket bean came in there.
yeah I always say the best place to store genetics is in the field and in
Definitely.
community. So
Absolutely.
having it out there growing, doing stuff at a lot of locations is excellent.
Right.
One more thing on Oikos before we hone in on perennial beans is I've always thought of Oikos as providing something that is pretty unusual in the marketplace, and that's semi-stabilized breed seed lines.
Yes.
Would
Right.
you say that's an accurate representation of
Yeah.
what you're
Yeah.
going for?
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what do you see as being like kind of the pros and cons of selling plants that are in this like improved or semi-stabilized state?
Well, here's the issue really. Um, it doesn't fit into cultivars, and it doesn't fit into um, the most extreme version of it, which is conservation. So here you've taken something that by itself is diverse. Each plant is different than the other to some extent, and then saying to people, oh, we can raise this commercially. We can, the yields are high enough. It doesn't have to be a clone. And that right there in the horticulture world is like, no, you can't do that. It's going to taste different. It's going to be funky. It's going to be bitter. It's going to be horrible. And but many of these wild foods don't require the same level of breeding where it's so refined, it's down to a single few genes, like apples today. And my story is no, you know what? When I was raising these, I was like, oh, for God's sakes, this is so much easier and so much more productive than any clonal plant that I've grown. And I tried to grow many types of clonal plants and was constantly disappointed by it. It wasn't that those plants were weak or inept, it's just they weren't as well adapted. And with a population, you can still continue to clone and name all the varieties you want, but at the same time, the value is in the population. And these populations are locked in to Cornell and Michigan State and all these places where the public does not have access to it. And this is a problem. So now you have this completely centralized breeding thing from people who go to the same schools, learn the same breeding techniques and science. And so you would expect everything to be the same because it's all the same type of efforts. And it is the same in many ways. And so what I think is of value is to have these collections decentralized throughout the United States. So every county has acres of these, of at least, of different types of fruits where people could go and just collect and eat and taste them. And that's the way it is with American persimmon at my farm. And I was like, oh my gosh, these should be on a lot of fence rows. So the next question is how do you get a seedling population from my farm to somebody else's farm? And there are a few, but wow, is that a hard thing to do, even if you give away the seeds? Because that's not the issue. The issue is what is somebody going to do with that? So, does that make
Yeah,
sense?
absolutely.
All right.
And yeah, I think it's a very special thing to be able to offer people, because not only are you providing plant material that is, easy to grow, relatively inexpensive, and is likely to produce well, but you're kind of giving people a really easy on-ramp into plant breeding and selection and
Right.
kind of having their hand in that work that used to be part of farming and gardening
It
for
did.
for
Yes.
everyone,
Everyone.
but kind of became centralized in the land grant universities and the, nowadays even more so in sort of like corporate um,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
development labs. And I
Yes.
think it's really awesome to bring that stuff back to the people essentially.
That's what you're doing. That's exactly what you're doing.
Um,
Back to
so
the people.
So there are any number of interesting plant breeding conversations that we could have. Um,
Yeah.
and you've been on my list of people to talk to for a long time, and I haven't pitched you before because I just could not make my mind up about what I wanted to ask you about. But one of I finally picked one out, and that's perennial beans.
Right.
And what makes perennial beans a worthwhile target for your breeding work, would you say?
Well, the idea of having a perennial anything is that, you first thing that comes to mind is, well, geez, I'll just plant something and I will not have to plant it again. It'll always be there. And then you have this situation where, okay, how deep do the roots go? How long does the plant live? And what is the quality of the beans from the food from this perennial bean? What is the makeup of that particular bean? And in this genre, there's actually several different beans that kind of float to the surface. And the one that most people know is Tepary beans, which are annuals, but there are a couple perennial versions of those as well. And you'll find the woolly beans that people, I guess, are edible. They're more listed as a biennial or perennial in nature. And but the true bean, Phaseolus or whatever it is, the genus, is it's probably there's only one, and that is the thicket bean. It's the thicket bean is probably the only one that is found in North America to any extent. But the runner bean that people grow also has a tuberous root, and it's marginally hardy, maybe in the six or seven range. And then people are trying to take populations of the runner bean and get it acclimated or bred for zone 5 or more. So there's several perennial those beans, the runner bean, the thicket bean, the Tepary bean, and and the woolly bean, those are the kind of considered the perennial beans, I guess, for me. So
Yeah. Oh, I think that makes sense. They're kind of like the ancestral stock
yes,
that you could, play around with.
you
Um,
could. Yep.
are
Yes.
are perennial runner beans like are they a very short-lived perennial or are they long-lived? And do
You
they
know,
in the places where they are perennial, do they produce well?
I'm I've been told and I've seen pictures of the ones in Great Britain. They can live for more than a decade, I think maybe even
Wow.
more. And
Cool.
there is a seed company that has hired a breeder that's working on, I saw it on LinkedIn a few years ago, and he was working on breeding more perennial runner beans. But if you dig up your runner beans at the end of the year, you'll see these big tuberous like shapes, and you can stick them in your fridge and hold them over that way and plant them the following year outside. So at least I can. I've never gotten them to survive here in Michigan, but I've been just growing them as annuals because of the pretty flowers.
Yeah. Yeah, I might
Yeah.
have to give that a try. Just throw them in the root cellar with the other sort of
Yeah.
tender perennials like a dahlia or something
Yes. Oh,
and
yeah. That would probably
see how
work.
they
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Very
It's
cool.
it's a weird shaped root. Um, I grew some in some pots this year because they got so hard to dig up in the past that I ruined them kind of getting them out of the ground. But in the pots they formed really nice little round shaped tuber type of root.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And with the thicket bean, are you having success with those as a perennial in zone 5?
Yes. So those have never suffered any winter damage at all. They've been
Wow.
fully hardy into zone 5. I think the if you look at the range map for them, it goes into New York and south, I think into Indiana, Illinois, a little mid, and then farther into maybe Georgia and also across Tennessee, kind of in the middle of America type of thing. And the range is rather scattered. There's not like it's not found everywhere, but it's in scattered pockets um, throughout the United States.
Cool. I've grown them for several years, but I've never really had them produce well.
No,
They bloom, they make tons of pods, but the
yeah,
seed doesn't really ripen for me.
Yes. Yeah, and I'm glad you said that because that's one of my things I've noticed. We had some short seasons where only a portion of the seeds ripened, and then as it got later, some of them didn't ripen fully, and they were
Yeah,
green. But I think every year there's been some either complete ripening or just partial ripening, but partial ripening was rare at my location in southern Michigan. Um,
interesting.
yeah,
And how about yield? Are they yielding, enough to sell seeds, or are they yielding kind of as a crop plant?
yeah. So the yields on those generally were low, and low when we first did it. We had a total of, let's see, one, two. There's three, two and a half, three. I guess three full trellises of them, and it went from, which were 50 feet long, and it went from 2 ounces, then it went up to 6 or something, and then it went up to over a pound, I think, and then we ended up almost with 2 pounds, I think, at one point. But then I was harvesting the roots from my nursery and selling those. So we tried to keep it alive as much as possible, and added more seeds and roots as we went along. But in general, they were lower yielding only because the low yields were, how do I explain this? They were, of course, the second year, there's some yielding, but not very much. And the third year, it really picks up. And from the fourth, fifth, and 6 years, it's as high as it's going to get. And it also improved with pollinators. So there's quite a mix of pollinators. And as more and more pollinators came to the flowers, there was much heavier yields of beans.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and there were different kinds of pollinators too, more and more, quite a variations of everything from cabbage butterflies to these little Hoover flies. There were a lot of Hoover flies. I would say the two most common were the Hoover flies and carpenter bees. Those were those were the two you saw the most of. And then it went from there to all these different butterflies, like the skippers, the oranges, and there were some honeybees in there, but not a lot. And then painted lady butterflies were in there here and there. And didn't I don't think I've seen any hummingbirds in there, but there was quite an array of insects doing the pollination. But those pods, they never formed like you'd have these big clusters of flowers, but only a portion would set pods. And that seemed to increase as the plant got bigger, but it never was to the point where, like, oh my gosh, it wasn't like Tepary beans. Tepary beans are very heavy producing usually, and these are not like that.
Yeah, this was my first year growing tepary beans,
Yeah,
and it was also the worst drought I've ever seen. And they did awesome.
yeah,
It was one of the things that was like really stood out as, thriving in my drought conditions, which makes
yes,
sense where they come from the Southwest and are like
totally.
known to be an arid climate crop.
Right.
But it was cool to see it in person. You mentioned some of those yield numbers of like, a few ounces to up to potentially a couple pounds. Is
Yeah.
that's yield per how much space?
Well, yeah. So I didn't. It was based on the trellises that I was using. So really, you're talking about um, 50, probably about 150 foot of to 200 feet of trellis space total in that. So the trellis space is like was 8 foot to 12 foot trellises, and one right next to the other. So that's kind of it. If you look at the cost of the harvesting and everything, you're probably looking at $400 to $500 a pound if you were to,
Yep.
yeah. So beans are cheap, not thick,
Yeah.
but not thick beans. So then I was like, well, okay, that wraps that up. But there is probably ways around that. And one way would be to treat it like you would like hairy vetch or something and grow an acre or two of it where it's just on its own
Yep.
and let it really build up mass for a couple years and then harvest it with some commercial or semi-commercial harvester with the
Yeah.
vines
Some
just
kind of
hanging over.
combine.
Yeah, combine system or but the the one thing that is common with thicket beans is they have these twisty pods. And so when the pods bust open on the trellis, they throw out the beans.
Yeah.
And the beans can fly. I don't know. I think at least I know that I got hit by one that was 15 feet away, but I bet you
Wow.
it could, yeah,
That's some
I'm sure,
range.
yeah, they really fly. Um, and I think part of it is there's some selections that are non-twisty pods too, you'll find in the population. And then supposedly some of the ones they found in a cave in New York that was in an archaeological dig from 9,000 years ago, those were non-twisty podded seeds that they or non-twisty pods they found there. So
Yeah.
they that
So
they
someone
suggest
may have been doing
that's what they suggest. Yeah.
some
So
breeding work on those
yeah,
9,000 years
exactly.
ago, potentially.
Yes, because there were no annual beans at that time
Mm.
in the north
Yeah, they
yet.
hadn't worked their way up from Mesoamerica yet.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So
Fascinating.
yeah, it is. So I think it could be done, where, but yeah, you'd have to get it down to but then, even if you got, I don't know, say you were to pass the 50-pound mark per acre thing, you could still sell it and use it, but you would combine it with other beans maybe to help pay for your experiment. So, because of the cost of establishing the perennial plant, goes for 2 years. Um, but once that would be hammered in more, as time went on, you probably could improve that selection quite a bit.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're so finicky in that respect. I've had people say, "Well, you got the wrong seed source," but I've tried other seed sources, and I don't think those are any better, really. I
Yeah,
think
well, I would say you're doing better than my patch because mine never ripen. So
yes. So
if
right
if
there,
yeah, so that's a good start. You're getting
yeah,
something.
yeah,
So sort of old school plant breeding. These could maybe be improved just by looking for individual differences in plants and selecting the ones that are heavier. But
yes, and you'll see that too. You will see that, and
that
I've
that's
seen
always
it.
a good sign. Sometimes
Yes,
I've considered a plant breeding project and just the population is too homogeneous to
right.
to make any
Oh,
real
that's
selective
frustrating.
pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
Which you try and get more sources and diversify the population before you
Right.
start making selections. What about the possibility of hybridizing a perennial bean with existing annual stock?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's definitely very not that hard to do. The thing was when when I started doing the what I was hoping was going to be hybridization, um, there was I noticed that there were a couple of thicket beans. There was one in particular at the end of a row once, and it was maybe 2 foot tall, and it was just packed with flowers. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Look at that. That plant is so rich in thicket beans flowers. And then it died. It just died the next year. And so I think within the perennial beans, there's some annual nature to a few of them. And there's some other ones that appear to have a more better fruit set, but not many. And so I was like, well, I really need more of a diversity. So I don't like reading about plant breeding or knowing what other people have done because it skews my thinking, and I don't want to be mess have that interfere with my creativity. So the first thing I did was plant a ton of temporary beans, and I basically engulfed this one thicket bean trellis with temporary beans. And I go, that'll get it. And then I raise then I raised them because the temporary bean, to me, the flowers look like it and everything. And so then I I raised those seeds from not the temporary bean seeds, but the thicket bean seeds from there, and there was no indication of hybridity.
Yeah.
And temporary beans have a very unique leaf. So I was like, well, that's kind of weird. So finally, I broke my cardinal rule and went on. I can't remember the where I read about it. I think it was a USDA publication, but it showed all the different branches of beans, the
Mm.
bean family, so to speak, and then where each comes from and its evolutionary kind of history, what they think is its evolutionary history. And it turns out that lima beans kind of in the same branch as the thicket bean. And I was like, ah. And it was from there that I started finding out that there were other people that also had hybridized it with thicket bean. And a few people I think I saw online in a social media account somewhere where they were raising the seedlings from the hybrid plants. And so that was the beginning. I said, well, I'll figure out a way to do this. And the the first group obviously is the cross pollination because thicket bean flowers late, super
Yeah.
late. And so I'm like, uh-oh. And so the first time out, um, I don't think there was a lot of natural cross pollination. There was some I got the flowers to overlap a little bit, but then in the following years, I was able to do it more consistently. And I just did it based on the just let nature do the pollinating. I wasn't going to attempt that. And so what happened was then the the second and third year, there was many more different types of pollinators because now I had lima beans in growing in with the thicket beans. And I was standing there hoping I could see one going in one flower and then coming out the other, but I never did see that. And so I was like, this is very frustrating. Boy, why don't you go in that flower, which is yellow lima bean flower next to the pink thicket bean flower? And then one year there was this really tiny, incredibly tiny, I think it was a type of Hoover fly, and it was really making use of the flowers, both the thicket bean flowers and the lima bean flowers. And it must have been just the familiarity of those flowers and having so many of them all close together that they were really doing some hybridizing. And it was from that population that I was getting pink flowered lima beans.
Oh, wild.
So yeah, so I was
So
like,
you got a pretty clear indication of
I
hybridity
thought it
there.
was good. Yeah, I was very happy with myself. And then I brought over a guy came to the farm. This is a year or two later who knows lima beans. And he goes, oh, I've never seen lima beans with pink flowers. I was like, yes. Yeah, and I
Success.
told him, okay, I thought so. And then, but then when I started yanking those plants out of these pots I had them in and saving the roots, they all died. None of them were perennials.
Yeah.
But I saw a couple perennials show up in the other trellis systems I had. And it's like, okay, well, it does work, but it's low. And so every year now I'm like, okay, uh, what do we got? What's left? How many perennials are there? And there might be two out there out of all that effort. But what I discovered was within the last 2 years, these some of the plants are have very perennial like roots. In other words, they're not only long, but they also have branches of roots, like clusters of roots that form. And
Yeah.
generally, yeah. So I was digging up lima beans and looking at their roots and then pinching them to see how hard or thick they were and if they were solid, and then saving those. And that's what I did this last fall. Um, I just picked this was now I'm taking pictures of the roots so I can try to make a perennial a more consistent population.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I I I know I'm on the right track. It's just that I need an expression from that latest group. So it's very low in the beginning, but then it's very high at the end. And so the goal is to make it so the whole population is close to perennial and not really care about the yields too much at this time, but just get it to be a perennial population of lima beans.
Yeah, very cool. What
Yeah.
how would you characterize the seeds of these perennial lima bean thicket bean hybrids?
Yeah. What happened was, and this is the part that's very confusing to me because I had assumed wrong that the the seeds would be in between in that, and they weren't. They were very odd. The shapes were different. They were almost like a parallelogram shape on some of them, and white, pure white. I don't know where that came from. I was like,
Oh, fascinating.
yeah. And then some were black or almost purple, and then others were purple with dots, which there are lima beans like that anyway. So it's not like it's a shock. But then when I noticed um, some of the best plants, the one characteristic was there was huge clusters of flowers with very strong, very heavy yields, like the heaviest yields I've ever seen on a lima bean. And pink flowers or white flowers. Um, then there was also the the seed colors were striated with speckles and very small. The seeds had shrunk, which and were flat. Some of them were very flat and small. And so I was like, well, that's actually better for me because I'm making a dry bean. You want something that cooks quick to begin with, because lima beans are like a slow process cooking, unless
Yeah.
they're in frozen green in one of those packages you get at the store. So, but anyway, that's the coloration. I'm not really sure what to expect this coming year, but from what I'm seeing, it'll be a mix of colors actually. And one of the things that I was really enjoyed that was the colors of the purple ones. They're all purple with white dots. Those are really cool. And then some of them have like a swirly white, almost like galaxies on the bean itself. So
Wow, they
that's kind of,
sound beautiful as
oh,
well
they really are cool.
as
Yeah.
being
I was like, oh my
fascinating.
gosh. Yeah. Some of them are just really just beautiful to photograph. So,
Very cool. And when did you make the initial hybrids?
well, let's see, I think the first one was, oh, that's got to be about 10 years ago or so. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, 10 years in the scheme of things is not
Yeah.
too bad.
I didn't think it was bad. No, I was
Yeah.
just kind of following along just to see what was going on. So I enjoyed it. Yeah. I enjoyed doing that.
Yeah. Well, that seems like a very interesting pathway for perennial bean breeding, compared to, the just selecting the best thicket bean and then that sort of I guess would that be logarithmic Just a
Yeah.
little bit, little bit, little bit. Just
Yeah.
make a crazy cross and then sort it out from there.
Yeah. So yeah, because
Seems
what
seems
yeah,
more interesting.
oh my God. So yeah, there's one plant and I was like, oh, I photographed it too. I think it was a little over 20 feet long and it had no beans on it. I was
Huh.
like, well, that's odd. And then the following year it fruited. It had lots of beans on it. And but they're white. They're pure
Yeah.
white. So I was like, well, I don't get it. So I didn't make a planting this year except for just a small group. And I'm devoting an old greenhouse space. I've taken the greenhouses down and gave them away to a farmer, and one of them to a farmer, and other ones were sold very inexpensively, so I could get rid of them. And so I'm using that footpath of where I had the greenhouses to create a new perennial bean garden. So the whole thing will be like a house filled with perennial beans. And
Cool.
I'm hoping, yeah, so I'm hoping I can show people that this fall if it all turns out. But the point is with this is the idea of creating a a bean, a nitrogen fixing plant that has very deep roots that goes down 10 or 20 feet, huge vine, highly vigorous, covers the ground with foliage, and then you have this high protein, delicious bean.
It's a
Um,
beautiful vision.
there's nothing wrong with that because we see all the other issues around protein right now and the horrible things that people are doing to get protein, like fungus or like in a vats. You know, I don't like that. I'm like, great, there's going to be more sick people because of that. We're not
Yeah.
meant to eat fungus outgrown in vats.
I'm not necessarily 100% against that, but I'm somewhat skeptical of its like
Yeah,
what are the implications, unintended consequences, and what is the feedstock for that? Like
yes,
if that all relies on, you know, massive amounts of input from monocrop corn, which it probably does,
yeah,
um, then that's maybe not a great direction to be going. And to have a high yielding perennial legume would just be a huge boon to any sort of perennial or ecologically based food system.
yeah. I put it on this. It could be to me. I'm not going to. I wouldn't say it could be. It is on on the same level as alfalfa is. Alfalfa is the savior of North America. I mean, it feeds so many animals, so helpful. Um, and it's the third largest crop in North America. So you have to wonder why was that so successful? Why? And it solved a lot of problems. Um, and I think, and I know the perennial bean would be the same way. It could solve problems.
Yeah,
Um, and
fascinating.
you get no more fertilizer, no more herbicides, no more. You could just have these massive, dense mats of thicket beans or hybrids of it growing in on land that could provide an annual harvest for someone in to raise for healthy food, to make people healthy, to make the farmer wealthy. So I could see that happening with this particular plant only because of its power. It's just, to dig up one of those roots, it takes a small tractor and an army of people to yank those out. And I never did get to the bottom of them.
Wow.
I think I remember one plant I pulled up and it just happened that the whole root came up and it was a 2-year plant and it was a little over 6 feet deep. And I was like,
Wow.
how
That's very
deep?
impressive.
Yeah, how deep do these roots go? And during this process of growing these, and you'll see other animals that also love bean roots too, and particularly the prairie vole. And the prairie vole will clip off the bottoms of those, which will then form two or three more tap roots. Now, if they eat the crown, then that's the end of the plant. But if they clip off the bottom, it'll just regenerate new roots.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. Hmm.
Well, very cool. I think that's a fascinating pathway.
Yeah.
Um, have you done much of anything with woody pulse crops like Siberian pea shrub or anything like that? And what do you think the prospects for those are?
I th That's a very good thing. No one has ever, I've never I had several of the species at my farm, and I've always wondered, like farther north, how you could if farther north would probably be more successful with them because of their hardiness range. But I'm always wondered, like, okay, what is in that pea? What why haven't people grown and eaten these? Or maybe they do, and I'm not familiar with the culture of it.
Yeah.
Are you
I
familiar with the culture of the Siberian pea?
Not really. I don't know that they've ever been like a staple crop for anyone.
Yeah.
I did interview someone a while ago on the topic of Siberian pea shrub, and she was getting good yields and mostly using them to make like fermented foods out of like miso
Huh.
and
Yeah.
like a soy sauce like fermented sauce.
Yeah.
And she thought very highly of them as sources of like flavor for these fermented foods.
Huh. Interesting.
And I've eaten them just as like a boiled pulse.
Yeah.
And they're very tasty. I think they kind of have like a cross between like walnut and lentil flavor.
Yeah.
So I think
Huh.
there's a lot of potential there, and obviously they're very vigorous plants, easy to grow. Can be kind of invasive in like the Canadian prairies, but around here they don't seem to be a ecological problem.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of the very small seed size.
Huh.
Like if you could breed for non-shattering potentially to help with
Yeah.
harvest
Sure.
and larger seeds, then I think they could be a viable crop. Although maybe non-shattering is not the way to go. I
Right.
never really thought they were worth the effort needed to pick them um,
Yeah.
until my friend Jack Cortez showed up at a seed exchange with a 5-gallon bucket that was half full.
What?
And I was like, how did you get all those?
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you just like lay a tarp around it when they start to shatter and you give a little shake and they fall into the tarp. I was like,
Wow.
oh, okay, maybe I was going about this the wrong way.
Huh. I was doing one pod at a time.
Yeah. Um, and
That's
I think
funny.
his plants are just genetically more productive than the ones in my garden. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna be growing some of his seed out this
That's a good
year.
idea. Well,
Um,
when I was growing those at my farm, I noticed can't remember how many species. There's 30 or 40 different species available for seed at the time.
yeah.
And I think it was Lawyer's Nursery Company that offered many kinds of them. And sometimes they would grow them. Um, we had a few kinds at the farm that I propagated of of those, not just the Siberica or whatever it is, the one
I think
that's most common.
arborescens is the regular one.
Yes, yeah. And then for some reason, I ended up with some seeds of a weeping kind too, um, that I grew because I saw it in town somewhere, and I noticed that the pods of all the beans were real clustered together up and down the plant itself. And I was like, oh, that's a pretty good yield.
Yeah. Did the
And
weeping ones come true to seed?
no, they didn't. And the weird part was I think I got 6 or 7 plants, but there was one that was kind of squatty. And moundy, you
Yeah.
know. But there's the other ones, I think I still have them. They're still producing. And then I have another, a larger tree type one. I can't remember the species name. And that was fairly decent producing. It's become a little too shady now at my farm. So a lot of the things like Caragana didn't res respond well to shade. But
Yeah, my great love of planting more tr nut trees and fruit trees has made full sun somewhat of a
yeah,
premium around here.
yeah, that's right. Yes. But yeah, it's a very, that's actually a good question because Caragana is a pea, is a bean. And why couldn't you, use that as a source of beans or peas?
Yeah, it's just another pathway that you could go down in breeding a perennial pulse.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I'm surprised. I don't know what's in it. I never really did any research with it too much, but I know it's a very durable little plant.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I love the edible flowers too.
They are? The
Yeah.
flowers are edible. I didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, they taste just like a snap pea, but
Really?
at least around here they're come well before in the season before the
Yeah.
snap peas are ready.
Hmm, that's interesting.
Yeah, definitely give those a taste this spring.
I'm gonna.
One other plant I wanted to touch on is the hog peanut.
Yes.
What do you make of that one? And I think that one
Well,
is more shade tolerant.
it is. Yes. So there was that one. The first time that I found the plant was uh, at my farm along a power line area near the front there. And I dug up the tubers by accident, and I was surprised at the size of them. And but I really didn't know the plant, so I had to do a little more research. And eventually, as time went on, we started growing it in our polyhouse on a weed mat. And basically, what it was is we'd use the weed mat to block the tubers from forming in the ground or in a pot, and it would then we'd just rip away the pots, and the tubers would be on the ground on the
Oh,
mat.
fascinating.
Yeah, so we just scrape them off into a little bucket and sold them for a while. And that was Crispy Snack, the variety we called Crispy Snack, which was a, low yielding tuber crop. And so that went on for at least a decade and or more. And then I got someone that called me who was a researcher, and he was very excited about uh, the hog peanut, and he was gonna try to grow and make selections of it. And he said that I said, well, when you go to look for these, they're very difficult to find in the forest. They kind of have this camo thing with the soil that sticks to the outer skin. And it really took a lot of effort or practice on my part to find those in the forest. And then he said that I said, but you will find some dark purple ones, some light ones. You'll find a couple black ones, and in the spotted ones, there's actually quite a bit of variation. And then some people feel that it was some comments that I got, but maybe just from one person that said, "Oh, it's a horrible invasive plant and hard to get rid of in in plantings, the landscape plantings, and the nursery industry hates it because of this and that." And I'm like, "Yeah, whatever."
In this
However,
particular
however
case,
you feel about it.
I would tend to agree with that. Yeah,
I'm
whatever.
like, okay, you hang on to
But
that.
at least
Bye.
around here, they're like I do take invasive plants very seriously as an ecological concern. But this is not that. This is a native plant here,
Well, it's
at
just a
least for
weed.
me.
It's a weed to people.
Yeah, and if
And
if you
yeah,
if you don't want an aggressive plant in your landscape that's going to go everywhere, yeah, don't plant that one.
I would avoid it. Yeah, I mean, but what happens is, I think there was some compost maker that had it in some compost, and usually it's a sign of nitrogen, lot less nitrogen. So it's a real nitrogen fixer, and it kind of grows in spots and then it disappears.
Yeah.
And the other aspect of it, which I didn't realize, it took me a while to figure this out, was there's several mice that catch them. So they'll dig them all up and then bury them in one spot.
Huh.
And in the spring, you'll see this like
A
little
cluster.
mossy, yeah. You go, what the heck is that? And then you dig in there a little bit, and there's all your little tubers.
Huh.
And so
Fascinating.
they may not get them all, or maybe they get eaten. Maybe the vole gets eaten or something. And so that's how the it's transported. It's by voles and them completely annihilating the plantings where there'll be so much of it, and then it'll just disappear and it'll be blank, back to a blank slate. They're very good at finding those.
Yeah, that's
And
very
so
interesting.
yeah, so we grew them in our greenhouse. We had them in a second house later, and then I think it was 2 years ago, I said, geez, I wonder what the yields of the actual beans are like. And so I put them on a trellis in 24-inch polypropylene pots. And I was rather surprised. There was actually quite heavy production. And then this year, last fall, yeah, this fall, um, I did the same thing, but I inoculated them with nitrogen fixer.
Hmm.
And that seemed to even increase the yields more.
Oh,
So
fascinating.
yeah, so the pods from those, there's only 3 or 5 seeds, I think it is, per pod, but in the wild, it may only be 1 or 2 seeds. But under cultivation, it really responded amazing with the amount of pods. So I don't know if that selection I have is actually any better or worse than other wild ones, but the tubers seem to be definitely larger. And the yields of the tubers seem low, but there are other species that people have and experimented with that have higher yield, quality tubers, higher yield of tubers, bigger tubers.
Cool.
So it would be cool to get those and try those, but I'm not going to have luck probably doing that. But I think one thing is, after I measure this year the total yields, I'm going to try to publish something about the amount of the beans. It isn't really a perennial, it's considered an annual, but the tubers form, and then that's your next year's crop.
Hmm.
So, the crop will produce more beans then.
Yeah.
And there's two types of pollination. There's one that creates the beans, and another that forms the tubers. There's some sort of weird thing that goes on with the tubers
Oh, that's
that form.
interesting.
Yeah, so it's like a peanut in that respect. And I think from what I've seen they've improved some of these other crops, unfortunately, through genetic engineering. And so
Hmm.
for now, I I'm hoping no one gets this crop and ruins it again with shitty breeding or genetic engineering breeding or whatever, because it's such an amazing vine and it's incredibly durable. It produces these pods that um, you can still harvest it in the when it's closed, and then as they dry, they split open and eject the seeds. So it could be easily commercially used, but I don't know what the flavor is like of the beans themselves. So I found someone that had studied it, I think it was in the 80s or 70s. There was a scientific article on it and about it had an unusual name. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, they analyzed the quality of the protein in it and the other minerals and things in it. But that technically if it regenerates itself from roots, even though it's a tuber, then um, that that is a perennial pulse of some sort.
Yeah,
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So I see a lot of possibilities. I what I would do is if I've spotted that now somewhere that I haven't been, I haven't looked for it outside of my farm, I would definitely collect seeds of it and try to grow it um, because it seems to be just as it is as a wild plant, easily grown and responds to cultivation. It's just no one has ever cultivated it.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it's
all.
always fascinating to see how these wild plants perform when you remove competition. Um,
Yeah, you're doing everything. You're providing love.
yeah.
Let's not forget love,
And
okay?
sometimes it's just like almost a completely different plant.
It is. Yes, it is a different plant. It's with you. It it's an odd thing, but I've had many plant breeders, people who work with plants, tell me stories, and it's kind of like a different universe. You're stepping in, it is a different universe. You're stepping into this thing where you're nurturing something and it responds,
Yeah.
and you're a little bit surprised, or
Yeah.
maybe a lot surprised.
Yeah. Sometimes it just works.
Yeah,
Well, this has been a fascinating conversation.
yes, it
Um,
is.
if people want to get their hands into the world of perennial bean breeding, how would you recommend that people start?
Well, there's Prairie Moon Nursery. Prairie Moon is a seed company. I think it's in Iowa, and they offer the Thicket Bean seeds. There's some probably on Etsy or eBay, but one of the things I've noticed is there's always misidentifications. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, Prairie
on
Moon is definitely like a trusted source.
Yeah, but
Like
if
they're
you
legit.
decide, yeah, if you decide to go to another source, make sure you do just a little bit of research and see if they have the scientific name on it as well. But that's where I would get started is just a small packet of seeds. Just get a small packet of seeds and grow it at the base of a trellis. They need scarring. They should be scarred with a little sandpaper
Yep.
that speeds up the water intake. It's a shiny seed, so it's natural for that to do that. And then just watch how it grows.
Cool.
Yeah,
Couldn't be any simpler.
it's a bean.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thank you so much for coming on the
Hey,
podcast. I
glad to be
feel like
here.
I've learned a lot. It's been
So have
fun.
I. Yes.
Um, and yeah, if people want to follow your work, is there a way that they can do that?
I write about a lot of my nursery experience on my WordPress site. It's called Biological Enrich, and you can go to the WordPress site, and there's a link to it on the front of the website, my website, as well as under WordPress. So,
Perfect. Well, I'll link to that in the show notes.
okay.
And I appreciate talking to you, and I hope you have
Nice
a good
talking to you,
afternoon.
Aaron. Yeah, you too. Bye bye.